The oldest boy stood in front of the 6 others like a shield made of bone and fury. 13 years old, starving, shaking in the December wind. Behind him, a little girl who hadn't spoken in 14 months pressed her face into her sister's coat. The twins held hands so tight their knuckles went white. And the baby, 4 years old with a rag doll clutched to her chest, kept asking why the church people walked past without looking. Jonas McAllister had buried his own children 5 years ago. He'd sworn never to stop for anyone again. He stopped. Stay with us until the very end. Drop a comment with your city so we can see how far this story travels. Hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. The wind cut through Elkhorn, Wyoming, like it had a personal grudge against every living soul. Jonas McAllister felt it through the holes in his coat as he led his horse down the frozen Main Street, each step a negotiation between a man and his exhaustion. He'd been drifting for 5 years now, town to town, job to job, never staying long enough for anyone to learn his name or ask questions he couldn't answer without his voice breaking. Elkhorn wasn't much. A single street of buildings huddled together against the cold. A church with a crooked steeple. A general store with frost on the windows. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and strangers were either welcomed or watched. Jonas was heading for the saloon, thinking about whiskey and a bed that didn't move underneath him, when he heard it. A child crying. Not the loud, demanding cry of a kid who wanted something. This was different. Quiet. Exhausted. The sound of someone who'd been crying so long, they'd forgotten why they started. He should have kept walking. That's what he'd taught himself to do. Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't look. Don't let anything catch hold of your heart, because hearts could break. And his had already broken once, and he wasn't sure he'd survive it breaking again. But his feet stopped anyway. 7 children huddled against the side of the church, pressed together like a litter of puppies trying to stay warm. The oldest, a boy, maybe 13, stood at the front with his arms spread wide, putting himself between the younger ones and the world. Jonas had seen that stance before. On soldiers protecting fallen comrades, on mothers shielding babies from danger. It was the stance of someone who decided that dying was acceptable, as long as the ones behind them survived. You kids all right? The boy's eyes snapped to him. Brown eyes, old eyes, eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. We're fine, mister. Move along. You don't look fine. Jonas took a step closer, and the boy tensed like a coiled spring. You look like you're freezing to death. I said we're fine. Eli, a girl's voice, soft but firm. She was maybe 11, with brown hair pulled back in a practical braid, and hands that were red and cracked from cold. Maybe he can help. Nobody helps, Grace. You know that. They just pretend they're going to help, and then they leave, or they hurt you, or they want something. That's how it works. Jonas felt those words like a fist to the chest. Because the boy wasn't wrong. That was exactly how the world worked most of the time. People promised, and people lied, and people left. He knew it better than most. I'm not asking for anything, Jonas said. Just asking if you're okay. We're waiting for someone. The boy, Eli, lifted his chin defiantly. Who? Silence. How long you been waiting? More silence. The girl, Grace, spoke up. Since September. Our pa died in September. We've been waiting for someone to... She trailed off. To what? To want us. This came from a smaller boy, maybe 9 years old, with curly blonde hair and eyes that seemed to be looking at something no one else could see. We've been waiting for someone to want us, but nobody does. We're too many. That's what Mrs. Hendricks said. 7 children is too many for anyone to take, so we just have to wait until we're not 7 anymore." The words hung in the frozen air. Jonas understood what the boy meant. Wait until some of them died. Wait until the number got small enough to be manageable. "What's your name, son?" "Toby. Tobias Brennan. But everyone calls me Toby, except when I'm in trouble." "You in trouble a lot, Toby?" A ghost of a smile. "My pa used to say I was born in trouble." "Toby, shut up!" Eli's voice was sharp. "Don't talk to him. Don't talk to any of them. They're all the same." Jonas looked past Eli to the others. Grace, the girl with the braid. Toby, the dreamer. Behind them, a girl with red hair who stood perfectly still, watching Jonas with eyes that seemed to see through him. She hadn't made a sound. Beside her, 2 smaller boys, twins, identical, clutched each other's hands. And at the very back, barely visible, a tiny girl with brown curls held a rag doll to her chest and shivered violently. 7 children, 7 orphans, waiting in the snow for someone to want them. "When's the last time you all ate?" "None of your business." Eli stepped forward, putting himself directly in Jonas's path. "I told you to move along. We don't need your help. We don't need anyone's help. I take care of them. That's my job. So just go to the saloon or the general store or wherever you are going and forget you saw us." "Can't do that." "Why not?" "Because I already saw you." Something flickered in Eli's eyes. Confusion, maybe, or hope quickly suppressed. "That don't mean nothing." "It means I can't unsee you. It means I can't walk into that saloon and drink my whiskey and pretend there aren't 7 kids freezing outside a church in the richest country in the world." Jonas crouched down, bringing himself closer to the boy's level. "How old are you?" 13? 13. And you've been taking care of 6 other children since September? Since before that, since our ma left. That was 2 years ago. Your ma left? Said she was going to get help. Said she'd come back for us. She didn't. Eli's voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a list. Then our pa drank himself to death. Got kicked by a horse when he was too drunk to move out of the way. Folks in town said they'd figure something out for us, but they didn't. They just kept walking past like we were invisible. So I figured out something myself. I keep them alive. That's all that matters. Jonas thought about his own son, Daniel. 8 years old when the diphtheria took him. 8 years old, and still believing his father could fix anything. Still believing that promises meant something. "You shouldn't have to do this alone," Jonas said quietly. "There ain't no shouldn't. There's just what is." Eli's jaw tightened. "Now are you going to move along, or do I have to make you?" Despite everything, Jonas almost smiled. 13 years old and ready to fight a grown man to protect his family. There was something admirable in that, something fierce and beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. "You couldn't make me do anything, son, but I respect that you'd try." "Don't call me son." "Fair enough." Jonas straightened up. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to the general store. I'm going to buy food. I'm going to come back here and give it to you. You can eat it or not. That's your choice. But I'm buying it either way. We don't take charity." "It's not charity. It's food. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Charity is what people give when they want to feel good about themselves. Food is what people give when they don't want kids to starve." Jonas turned toward the general store. "I'll be back in 10 minutes. "We might not be here." "Then I'll find you." He walked away before Eli could respond, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. Behind him, he heard Grace's voice, low and urgent. "Eli, maybe we should—" "No. He's like all the rest. He'll buy some food, feel good about himself, and ride out of town tomorrow. That's how they are. You can't trust them." "I'm hungry, Eli." This was one of the twins. "I'm really hungry. Ben is too. He's been coughing all night." I know. Just let me think." The general store was warm inside, almost shockingly so after the bitter cold outside. A woman stood behind the counter, middle-aged with a face that had settled into permanent disapproval. She looked up when Jonas entered, her eyes moving over his worn coat, his unshaven face, his road-weary appearance. "Help you? I need food. Bread, cheese, whatever meat you've got. Enough for 7, 8, counting me." Her eyebrows rose. "That's a lot of food." "I've got a lot of hunger to fill." She began gathering items, wrapping them in brown paper, stacking them on the counter. Jonas watched her work, his mind still on those 7 children pressed against the church wall. "Those kids outside," he said. "How long they've been there?" The woman's hands paused. "The Brennan children? I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do. How long?" "Since September, I suppose. After their father died." She resumed wrapping, not meeting his eyes. "It's a terrible situation. Everyone agrees on that. But nobody does anything about it." "What would you have us do, mister? There's no orphanage within 200 miles. No family willing to take in 7 children. The church feeds them when it can. Mrs. Morrison lets them sleep in her barn when the weather gets too cold. We do what we can." "Letting children freeze against a church wall is what you can do?" Her eyes snapped up, sharp and defensive. "We're frontier people. We barely have enough for our own families. 7 more mouths to feed, 7 more bodies to clothe. It's not possible. We're not heartless. We're just limited." "There's a man in this town named Cornelius Wade. I've heard of him. Biggest ranch in the territory. He couldn't take them in?" Something flickered across the woman's face. Fear, maybe, or disgust. "Mr. Wade has offered, multiple times." "Then why hasn't someone—" "Because we've seen how he treats the children who work for him." Her voice dropped. "They come to town sometimes, those boys. Thin as rails, scared to speak. Bruises they try to hide." She shook her head. "Some of us would rather the Brennan children take their chances with the cold." Jonas absorbed this. A rich man who wanted orphans. Not to help them, to use them. "How much do I owe you?" She told him. He paid. She handed over the packages. "You're not going to save them, you know." Her voice had softened slightly. "One meal won't change anything. Tomorrow, they'll still be hungry. Next week, they'll still be freezing. Unless someone takes them in properly, legally, they'll just keep waiting until—" She didn't finish. "Until they're not 7 anymore." "Yes." Jonas gathered the food in his arms. "Thank you for your honesty, ma'am." "Don't thank me. I haven't done anything worth thanking." He walked back out into the cold, the packages heavy in his arms, and found the children exactly where he'd left them. Eli stood at the front, arms crossed, face set in stubborn defiance. But behind him, the younger ones watched Jonas approach with naked hunger in their eyes. "I told you we don't—" "I heard you." Jonas set the packages down at Eli's feet. "And I'm telling you, I don't care. This is food. It's yours. What you do with it is your business." The little girl at the back, the one with the rag doll, pushed forward through her siblings. "Is that bread? Is that real bread?" "Hannah, no." Grace tried to grab her, but the child was too quick. "I can smell it." Hannah stopped in front of Jonas, tilting her head back to look up at him. "You're tall, real tall, like a tree." "Hannah, come back here right now." But Hannah ignored her sister. She studied Jonas with the unguarded curiosity that only very young children possessed. "Are you going to hurt us, like Pa did?" The question hit Jonas like a physical blow. He dropped to one knee, bringing himself to the child's level. "No, sweetheart. I'm not going to hurt anyone." "Promise?" "I promise." Pa used to promise too. Then he'd get the bottle out and forget all his promises. Hannah hugged her doll tighter. "Eli says that's what grown-ups do. They promise, and then they forget."
Some grown-ups do that, not all of them.
"Which kind are you?" Jonas looked into those innocent eyes, so trusting despite everything she'd been through, and felt something crack open in his chest. Something he'd kept locked away for 5 years. "I'm the kind that keeps his promises." "Good," Hannah nodded solemnly. "Can I have some bread now?" Despite everything, despite the cold and the hunger and the impossible situation, Jonas almost laughed. "Yes, sweetheart, you can have some bread." He unwrapped one of the packages, broke off a chunk of bread, and handed it to Hannah. She took it reverently, like he'd given her gold instead of flour and water. "Thank you, Mr. Tallman." "You're welcome, Miss Hannah." She retreated to her siblings, already tearing into the bread. And Jonas saw what happened next. She broke it into smaller pieces and handed them out to her brothers and sisters before taking any for herself. 4 years old, starving, and still sharing. One by one, the other children came forward. The twins, Sam and Ben, grabbed food with both hands and ate so fast Jonas worried they'd make themselves sick. Toby took his portion and sat down right there in the snow, eating methodically while his eyes wandered somewhere far away. Grace hesitated, looking at Eli for permission, and when he didn't give it, she came forward anyway. "Thank you, sir, for this." "You're welcome, and don't call me sir. Name's Jonas." "Thank you, Jonas." She took food for herself, then extra for the silent red-haired girl who still hadn't moved or spoken. "Ruth doesn't talk," Grace explained quietly. "She can, she just doesn't, not since the fire." "What fire?" "The one that killed her parents. Her and the twins, they're our cousins. They came to live with us after, but Ruth just stopped. She hasn't said a word in 14 months. Jonas looked at Ruth. She stood perfectly still, watching everything with those sharp eyes, taking in every detail. When Grace brought her food, she took it without acknowledgement, but Jonas saw her hands trembling. Only Eli remained where he was, arms still crossed, refusing to touch the food. "You planning to starve yourself while they eat?" "I don't need your charity." "We already established it's not charity." "Call it whatever you want. I don't take things from strangers." "Then don't think of me as a stranger. Think of me as the man who's going to keep standing here until you eat something." Eli's jaw worked. "Why do you care? You don't know us. You're just passing through, like all the rest. Tomorrow you'll be gone, and we'll still be here." "Maybe." "Not maybe. Definitely. That's how it always goes. People come, people feel sorry for us, people leave. We've learned not to expect anything different." Jonas sat down on the frozen ground, ignoring the cold that immediately seeped through his pants. He pulled out a piece of bread and began eating it slowly. "What are you doing?" Eli demanded. "Eating. It's generally done in a sitting position." "Why are you sitting there?" "Because I'm tired. Been riding for 3 weeks. Figured I'd rest for a bit." "You're not going to leave?" "Not until I finish my bread. That could take a while." "I eat slow." Eli stared at him. The other children had stopped eating to watch the standoff between their brother and this strange man who wouldn't go away. "You're different," Eli said finally. Most people, when I tell them to leave, they leave. I'm not most people. Clearly. Eli uncrossed his arms, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. If I eat, will you stop looking at me like that? Like what? Like you're trying to figure me out. I'm not trying to figure you out. I'm just trying to understand why a 13-year-old thinks he has to carry the weight of the world. Because someone has to, and there's no one else. There could be. Eli laughed, but there was no humor in it. Yeah, right. Who? The people in this town who walk past us every day? The sheriff who pretends we don't exist? The church ladies who pray for us but never actually help? He shook his head. We learned a long time ago that if we want to survive, we have to do it ourselves. That's a heavy lesson for someone your age. Age doesn't matter. Only survival matters. Jonas finished his bread, brushed the crumbs from his hands. What if I told you I know something about survival? I'd say everyone thinks they know something about survival, until they actually have to survive. Fair point. Jonas pulled out another piece of bread, tossed it to Eli. The boy caught it reflexively. Eat, please. If not for yourself, then for them. They're watching you. If you don't eat, they'll think there's something wrong with the food. Eli looked down at the bread in his hands, then at his siblings, who were indeed watching with worried expressions.
Toby's dreamy eyes had sharpened with concern.
Grace was already moving closer, ready to intervene. Fine. Eli bit into the bread viciously, like he was attacking it. But this doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean we're friends. It doesn't mean I trust you. It just means I'm hungry. Understood. They ate in silence for a few minutes, all 7 children and 1 drifter huddled in the shadow of a church that wasn't keeping them warm. Jonas watched them eat, cataloging details. Ben's cough, the way Sam hovered protectively over his twin. Ruth's hypervigilance, never relaxing even as she ate. Hannah's constant glances at Jonas, checking to make sure he was still there. Grace's worried looks at Eli. Toby's tendency to drift off into his own world between bites. "Where are you sleeping tonight?" Jonas asked. Eli's guard went up immediately. "Why?" "It's going to snow. Temperature's going to drop below 0.
I'm asking where you're sleeping because I want to know if you'll be alive in the morning.
We've survived worse." "That's not an answer." Grace spoke up before Eli could argue. "Mrs. Morrison lets us sleep in her barn sometimes, but her husband got sick last week, and she's been busy taking care of him. We haven't wanted to bother her. So where have you been sleeping?" Silence. "Where?" "The old Brennan cabin." Grace wouldn't meet his eyes. "It's our pa's place. But the roof collapsed after the last storm. It's not really safe, but it's better than nothing. You've been sleeping in a collapsed cabin in the middle of winter. We used the part that didn't collapse. There's still one corner that's mostly covered." Jonas closed his eyes, trying to control the anger rising in his chest. Not anger at the children, never at them. Anger at a world that allowed this. Anger at a town that watched it happen. Anger at himself for all the times he'd walked past suffering because it was easier than stopping. That's not happening tonight. Eli was on his feet instantly. "You don't get to tell us what to do." "You're right, I don't. But I'm telling you anyway. There's a livery stable at the end of the street. It's warm, it's dry. The owner's a man named Henderson. I'll pay him whatever he wants to let you sleep there tonight." "We don't need Eli." Grace's voice was tired. "Please. Ben's getting worse. He can't spend another night in the cold. You know that." "I know we can't trust strangers." "This one bought us food. This one didn't walk away." Grace stood up, facing her brother with a courage that seemed to surprise even her. "You've been protecting us for 2 years. Maybe it's time to let someone help." "And when he leaves tomorrow, what then?" "Then we're right back where we started. but at least Ben will have had one warm night. At least Hannah won't have cried herself to sleep from the cold. Grace's eyes were bright with unshed tears. We're dying, Eli. Slowly, but we're dying. And I'm tired. I'm so tired. Aren't you? Eli stared at his sister, and Jonas saw it, the crack in the armor. The boy was exhausted. He had been carrying an impossible weight for an impossibly long time, and he was breaking under it. One night, Eli said finally. We'll try one night. But if anything goes wrong, anything at all, we leave. Understood? Grace nodded. Understood. Eli turned to Jonas, his expression hard. You hurt any of them, I'll kill you. I mean it. I don't care how big you are or how strong. I'll find a way. I believe you. Jonas met the boy's eyes steadily. And I give you my word, no one's going to hurt them. Not tonight. Not while I'm around. Your word doesn't mean anything. I don't know you. Then let me show you. Let me prove it. Eli's jaw tightened. He turned away, gathering the younger children with quick, efficient movements. Come on, grab everything. We're moving. Where are we going, Eli? Hannah clutched her rag doll. Somewhere warm, apparently. He shot Jonas a look that was equal parts suspicion and something else. Something that might have been desperate hope. The tall man's paying for it. I like the tall man, Hannah announced. He gave us bread. Yeah, well, we'll see. They walked through the frozen town together, 7 children and 1 drifter, attracting stares from the few people still outside. Jonas saw curtains twitch in windows, saw doors close quickly, saw the averted gazes of people who knew exactly who these children were and exactly how little they were willing to do about it. The livery stable was at the end of the main street, a solid structure with a peaked roof and wide doors that were currently closed against the cold. Jonas knocked, and after a moment, a grizzled man in his 60s appeared. Help you? I need to stable my horse, and I need a warm place for these children to sleep tonight. I'll pay whatever you're asking. Henderson's eyes moved over the children, recognition flickering across his face. The Brennan kids? And the McCarthy cousins? His expression softened slightly. That's a lot of small bodies to keep warm. I've got money. Ain't about money, exactly. It's about... Henderson scratched his beard. Look, I've got no problem with the little ones. But there's some in this town who don't want folks helping them. Say it encourages dependency. Say it's not their fault those kids don't have parents, but it's not their responsibility either. Let me guess. Cornelius Wade? Henderson's eyes narrowed. You know Wade? Know of him. Know he wants these children. Yeah, he does. Made it real clear anyone helping them is making his life difficult. Henderson glanced back into the stable, then at the children again. At Ben, who was leaning heavily against his twin, coughing weakly. At Hannah, shivering violently despite being pressed against Grace's side. Ah, hell, I ain't afraid of Wade. Been telling myself I am, but truth is, I'm just tired. Get in here, all of you. There's clean hay in the back, and I'll bring blankets. Thank you, Jonas said. Don't thank me. I should have done this weeks ago. Henderson stepped aside, holding the door open. Kids, come on in. It's warm. Got a stove going. The younger children rushed past, drawn by the promise of warmth. Only Eli hung back, still suspicious. What do you want? He asked Jonas. Really? Nobody does something for nothing. I want you to be warm tonight, that's all. We can figure out tomorrow when it comes. That's not how the world works. Maybe not, but it's how I'm working tonight. Eli studied him for a long moment, searching for the lie, the angle, the hidden motive. Jonas let him look. He had nothing to hide. One night, Eli repeated, and I'm not sleeping. I'm watching. If you try anything, you'll kill me. I remember. Jonas gestured toward the warm stable. Go. Your brother needs you. Eli went, disappearing into the stable where his siblings were already burrowing into the hay. Jonas stayed outside for a moment, looking up at the sky. Snow was beginning to fall, soft and steady, blanketing the town in white. He should leave. He knew that. Tomorrow he could ride out, continue his drift, forget about 7 orphaned children and a town that didn't care about them. That's what he'd been doing for 5 years. That's who he'd become. But then he thought about Hannah's question. Are you going to hurt us like Pa did? And Grace's tired declaration. We're dying, Eli. Slowly. But we're dying. And Eli's challenge. Tomorrow you'll be gone, and we'll still be here. Jonas walked into the stable. Henderson had been true to his word. The space was warm, heated by a cast-iron stove in the corner. The children had claimed a spot near the back, piling hay around themselves like nests. Hannah was already asleep, curled against Grace. The twins lay pressed together, Ben's cough slightly easier in the warm air. Toby sat with his back against the wall, eyes half closed, whispering something to himself that sounded like a story. Ruth sat apart from the others, still watchful, still silent. She tracked Jonas's movement as he entered, her eyes following him with an intensity that should have been unsettling but somehow wasn't. You can look at me, you know, Jonas said quietly, settling onto a hay bale across from her. Doesn't bother me. Ruth didn't respond. Of course she didn't. 14 months of silence wasn't going to break because a stranger said it was okay to stare. Grace told me about the fire, about your folks. Jonas kept his voice low, not wanting to disturb the others. I'm sorry. That's a hell of a thing for anyone to live through, let alone a kid. Still nothing. But Ruth didn't look away either. I lost people too. My wife, my children. 3 of them. Daniel was 8. Sarah was 5. Matthew was just a baby, still in his crib. Jonas hadn't said their names out loud in years. The sound of them in the air was painful and healing all at once. Diphtheria. Took all of them in 2 weeks. Took my whole world. Ruth's eyes flickered. The first real response he'd seen from her. That's why I've been drifting. Running, really. Thought if I kept moving, I could outrun the grief, the guilt, the feeling that I should have died with them. Jonas looked at his hands, rough and scarred from years of work that was never quite hard enough to quiet his mind. Hasn't worked. The ghosts follow you wherever you go. You can't outrun what's inside you. Ruth shifted slightly, turning more toward him. Her hands, which had been clenched in her lap, loosened just a fraction. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe because you can't tell anyone else. He smiled without humor. Or maybe because I recognize something in your eyes. The look of someone who saw too much and decided the only safe thing was to stop. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who understood something about each other without needing words. Anyway, Jonas straightened, you should sleep. It's warm. It's safe. I'll be here all night. Anyone comes through that door, they'll have to go through me first. Ruth held his gaze for a long moment. Then, so slightly he almost missed it, she nodded. Just once. And then she turned away, curling up in the hay, closing her eyes. It wasn't much, but it was something. You're still here, Eli's voice came from the shadows. Told you I would be. Most people say a lot of things. Eli moved into the light, his face tired, but his eyes still alert. You know this doesn't change anything. One warm night doesn't fix our problems. Tomorrow we'll still be orphans, still be unwanted, still be waiting for someone who's never coming. I know. Then why bother? Jonas thought about that, really thought about it. Why had he stopped? Why was he still here? He'd walked past suffering plenty of times in the past 5 years. Told himself it wasn't his problem. Told himself he had nothing left to give. But those children, huddled against the church wall. "Because I've been running for a long time," Jonas said finally. "And I'm tired. And maybe, just maybe, stopping to help someone else is the only way to help myself." Eli considered this. "That's selfish." "Probably. Does it matter?" "I don't know." Eli sat down on a hay bale, some of the tension finally leaving his shoulders. "I don't know anything anymore. Used to think I understood how the world worked. Now I'm just trying to keep everyone alive until—" He trailed off.
Until what? Until something changes. Until someone actually helps. Until we're old enough to take care of ourselves. A bitter laugh. Until we're not 7 anymore. What if something changed tonight? Eli looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean—" Jonas paused, not sure himself what he meant. This wasn't his plan. He hadn't ridden into Elkhorn looking for 7 children to save. He'd ridden in looking for whiskey and a bed, same as every other town. But here he was. Here they were. And something felt different. "I mean, maybe we don't have to figure out everything tonight. Maybe tonight we just survive, and tomorrow we figure out what comes next." "We?" Eli's voice was suspicious. "There's no we. There's them." He gestured toward his sleeping siblings. "And there's you. You're passing through. You said so yourself." "I did say that, but plans change." "Not in my experience." "Then maybe it's time for a new experience." Eli stared at him, searching again for the lie, the trick, the inevitable betrayal. Jonas let him look. He had nothing to prove except through action, and action took time. "Get some sleep," Jonas said. "I'll keep watch." "I don't sleep. Someone has to stay alert." "Someone is staying alert. Me." "How do I know you won't—" "You don't. That's what trust is. Doing something even though you're not sure. Even though you might get hurt." Jonas leaned back against the stable wall. "You've been protecting them for 2 years. Let someone else take the watch for 1 night. Just 1 night." Eli's eyes were heavy, his body sagging despite his determination. 2 years of vigilance. 2 years of never letting down his guard. It had to be exhausting. "1 night," he repeated. It was becoming a refrain between them. 1 night. "And you'll wake me if anything happens?" "I'll wake you." Eli's resolve crumbled. He was too tired to fight anymore. Too tired to keep his walls up. He lay down in the hay near his siblings, close enough to reach them if needed, his eyes closing almost immediately. "Jonas?" His voice was already thick with approaching sleep. "Yeah?" "If you hurt them, if you're lying about everything, I really will kill you. Somehow." "I know. I believe you." Eli didn't respond. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into the rhythm of sleep. All 7 children slept now, safe and warm for the first time in months. Jonas sat in the darkness, listening to them breathe, watching the snow fall past the single window. He thought about Clara, about Daniel and Sarah and baby Matthew. Thought about the graves he dug in frozen Pennsylvania soil. Thought about 5 years of running and the certainty that he'd never stop, because stopping meant facing what he'd lost. But tonight, he'd stopped. Tonight, 7 children slept peacefully because he'd chosen to see them instead of walking past. Maybe it didn't mean anything. Maybe tomorrow he'd ride out, and they'd go back to starving and freezing and waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Maybe this was just one warm night in a lifetime of cold ones.
Or maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something different. Jonas didn't know, couldn't know. All he knew was that he was here, and they were here, and for this one night, that was enough. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, 7 children dreamed of something they'd almost forgotten how to hope for. A home, a family, someone who would stay. And in the darkness, a man who'd thought his heart was dead began to feel it beating again. Morning came with pale light filtering through the stable's dusty windows. Jonas hadn't slept, hadn't even tried. He'd sat in that same spot all night, watching the children breathe, listening for any sound that might signal danger. Now, as the first gray of dawn crept across the hay-covered floor, he watched them wake one by one. Hannah first, sitting up with a rag doll clutched to her chest, looking around with momentary confusion before her eyes found Jonas. "You're still here." "Told you I would be." "Eli said you'd leave. He said grown-ups always leave when it gets hard." "Eli's been right about a lot of things, but he's wrong about this one." Hannah crawled out of the hay, brushing strands from her tangled curls, and walked straight to Jonas. She stood in front of him, studying his face with an intensity that should have been unsettling from a 4-year-old. "Are you hungry, Mr. Tall Man?" "A little. Are you?" "I'm always hungry. Grace says my stomach is bigger than the rest of me." She held up her rag doll. "This is Margaret. She's hungry too, but she doesn't eat real food. She eats stories." "Stories?" "Toby tells her stories at night. That's how she stays full." Hannah nodded solemnly. "Maybe you could tell her a story sometime. She likes ones about horses." Jonas felt something twist in his chest. His daughter Sarah had been like this, full of imagination and impossible logic that somehow made perfect sense. "I'll see what I can do." The others were stirring now. Grace sat up first, her eyes going immediately to a head count, a habit she'd clearly developed over months of responsibility. The twins woke together, as twins do, Ben's cough immediately filling the quiet morning air. Toby emerged from whatever dream world he'd been inhabiting, blinking slowly as reality reasserted itself. Ruth was already awake. Jonas suspected she hadn't slept much either. Her eyes met his across the stable, and something passed between them. Not trust, not yet, but acknowledgement. And Eli. Eli woke like a soldier, going from sleep to full alertness in a single breath, his body tensing as he scanned the space for threats. When his gaze landed on Jonas, still sitting exactly where he'd been the night before, something flickered across his face. "You actually stayed." "Told you I would." "Yeah, well," Eli stood, brushing hay from his clothes. "Saying and doing are different things." "They are. That's why I did instead of just said." Grace had moved to Ben's side, pressing her hand to his forehead. Her expression tightened. "He's warm. Warmer than yesterday." "It's nothing." Ben tried to push her hand away, but the attempt turned into a coughing fit that left him gasping. "That doesn't sound like nothing." Jonas crossed to where the twins lay. "How long has he been coughing like that?" "Few days," Sam answered, when Ben couldn't. "He says it's just the cold. Says he'll be fine when it warms up." "It's not going to warm up for months. Wyoming winter doesn't work that way." "We know how Wyoming winter works." Eli's voice was sharp. "We've survived 2 of them." Surviving and thriving aren't the same thing. Jonas knelt beside Ben, studying the boy's flushed face, the brightness in his eyes that spoke of fever. "He needs a doctor. Doctors cost money." "I have money." "We don't take charity, I know, you've mentioned." Jonas stood. "What about taking help when your brother's sick? Is that different? Or does your pride extend to letting him get worse?" Eli's hands clenched at his sides. For a moment, Jonas thought the boy might actually swing at him. Then Grace stepped between them.
Eli, please, he's right. Ben's been getting worse for days, and we've been pretending it's nothing because we didn't have any other choice. Now, maybe we do.
We don't know this man.
We didn't know Mrs. Morrison either, and she let us sleep in her barn. We didn't know Mr. Henderson, and he let us stay here last night. Sometimes strangers help.
And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they pretend to help and then...
And then what? Grace's voice cracked.
What's the alternative, Eli? We go back to the cabin with the collapsed roof? We spend another night huddled together, hoping the cold doesn't kill us before morning? Ben needs help. Real help. And this man is offering it. The stable went quiet. All the children were watching now. Hannah with her rag doll, Toby with his dreamy eyes, Ruth with her sharp silence, Sam with his arm around his coughing twin. Eli looked at each of them in turn. His family, his responsibility, the weight of them visible in every line of his young face. Fine. The word came out like it hurt. We'll see the doctor. But I'm coming too. And if anything seems wrong, anything at all, we leave. Agreed. Jonas headed for the stable door. I'll find out where the doctor lives. You get them ready to move. The morning air hit him like a slap, bitter cold, even with the sun rising. The town was starting to wake up, smoke rising from chimneys, a few early risers moving between buildings. Jonas spotted Henderson near the corral and made his way over. Doctor in this town? Doc Mercer. Office is on the other end of the street, past the church. Henderson studied Jonas with knowing eyes. One of the little ones sick? The smaller twin, Ben, got a cough that sounds like it's settling in his chest. That's not good. Winter coughs can turn deadly fast in young ones. Henderson paused. You know, Mercer's a good man. Came out here from Boston a few years back. Some kind of scandal, I heard, but he's never been anything but decent since he arrived. He'll help if he can. What kind of scandal? The romantic kind. Wrong person, wrong circumstances. You know how it goes. Henderson shrugged. Point is, he knows what it's like to be judged. Might make him more sympathetic to those kids. Jonas thanked him and returned to the stable. The children were ready, such as they were. Clothes straightened, hay brushed off, faces wiped with water from the horse trough. They looked like what they were, survivors. Battered, but not broken. They walked through town together, and Jonas felt every stare, heard every whispered conversation that stopped when they passed. The good people of Elkhorn, watching 7 orphans being led by a stranger, doing absolutely nothing about either. A woman stepped out of the general store, the same woman Jonas had bought food from the night before. She caught his eye, and something like shame flickered across her face before she looked away. The doctor's office was a small building at the end of the street, marked by a simple sign, William Mercer, Doctor. Jonas knocked, and after a moment, the door opened. Dr. Mercer was younger than Jonas expected, maybe 40, with dark hair going gray at the temples, and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He looked at the assembly on his doorstep with surprise that quickly shifted to understanding. The Brennan children, and you must be the stranger I've been hearing about. Word travels fast. In Elkhorn, word travels faster than the wind. Mercer stepped aside. Come in, all of you. It's too cold to stand outside. The office was small but warm, heated by a potbelly stove in the corner. Medical instruments lined the shelves, and the smell of antiseptic hung in the air. The children filed in uncertainly, clustering together out of habit. Which one needs attention? Mercer asked. Jonas gestured to Ben, who was leaning heavily against his twin. Cough and fever, getting worse over the past few days. Mercer crouched down to Ben's level.
Hello there. I'm Dr. Mercer. Mind if I take a listen to your breathing? Ben looked at Eli, who nodded reluctantly.
Okay,
Ben whispered. The examination was thorough but gentle. Mercer listened to Ben's chest, checked his temperature, looked at his throat and eyes. Throughout it all, he kept up a quiet conversation with the boy, asking about favorite foods and whether he preferred summer or winter and what he wanted to be when he grew up. A horse trainer, Ben answered, like my pa was, before he got mean. Something passed across Mercer's face. Pain, maybe, or recognition. Horses are good. They don't judge. They just respond to how you treat them.
That's what Eli says.
Eli sounds smart.
He is. He takes care of all of us. He's the best brother in the whole world.
Jonas watched Eli's face during this exchange. The boy's expression didn't change, but something softened in his eyes. Mercer finished his examination and stood, addressing Jonas and Eli together. It's bronchitis. Not pneumonia yet, but it could become that if he doesn't get proper rest, warmth, and nutrition. I can give him medicine to help with the cough, but what he really needs is to be inside, warm, for at least a week. 2 would be better.
We don't have a place to be inside, Eli said flatly. Our cabin's roof collapsed. What about the families in town? Someone must be willing to—
No one's willing. Trust me. We've asked. Mercer's jaw tightened. I see. He turned to Jonas. And you? What's your role in all this?
I'm trying to figure that out.
Well, figure faster. This boy doesn't have time for uncertainty. Mercer went to his medicine cabinet, pulling out bottles and mixing something in the small container. I can give you enough medicine for a week. After that, he'll need more if he's not better. As for the cost, he glanced at the children, at their thin faces and worn clothes. Consider it community service.
I can pay,
Jonas said. I'm sure you can. But some debts aren't meant to be paid in money. Mercer handed the medicine to Grace, who seemed the most likely to ensure it was administered properly. Every 4 hours, 2 spoonfuls. Make sure he drinks water and stays warm. And if his fever gets worse, or he starts having trouble breathing, you come straight back, day or night. Understood? Grace nodded solemnly.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Don't thank me. I should have sought you children out weeks ago. Mercer's voice was heavy. We all should have. They left the doctor's office with medicine and guilt, and the same problem they'd had before. Nowhere to go. The stable was a temporary solution, not a home. The collapsed cabin was a death trap waiting to happen. And the streets of Elkhorn were no place for 7 children in the middle of winter. Now what? Eli asked, and for the first time, his voice held something other than suspicion. It held exhaustion, desperation. The sound of someone who'd been fighting for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to win. Now we find somewhere permanent.
Where? You heard Mercer. No one's willing.
Then we make them willing.
How? You going to force people to care at gunpoint?
Jonas almost smiled.
Nothing that dramatic. But there's got to be something. An abandoned building, an empty cabin, somewhere that could be fixed up. This town's not that big. There's got to be space somewhere.
There is,
Grace spoke up, her voice quiet but certain.
The old Miller place. The flour mill at the edge of town. It's been empty for years, ever since Mr. Miller died and his wife moved back east. No one's claimed it.
Why not?
People say it's haunted. Say Mr. Miller's ghost walks the halls at night.
Grace shrugged.
I don't believe in ghosts, but even if I did, I'd rather face a ghost than another night in the cold.
Show me. The mill was about a half-mile from the main street, set against a hill with a frozen creek running beside it. It was bigger than Jonas expected. 2 stories, with a water wheel that had long since stopped turning, and windows that were mostly intact despite years of neglect.
It's solid, Jonas said, walking around the structure, testing walls and checking the foundation.
Needs work, But the bones are good. Nobody's going to let us live here, Eli said. Not without permission. And nobody's going to give permission to 7 orphans and a drifter. Who owns it? The bank, I think. They've been trying to sell it for years, but nobody wants to buy a haunted flour mill in a dying town. Jonas filed that away. Something to deal with later. For now, the immediate concern was getting the children inside, somewhere out of the cold, while he figured out next steps. Can we get in? There's a loose board around back. Toby found it last summer when we were exploring. They entered through the gap, emerging into a large open space that had once held milling equipment. Dust covered everything, and cobwebs hung from the rafters, but the roof was intact, and the walls blocked the wind. It was cold, but not as cold as outside.
Not as cold as a collapsed cabin or a church doorstep.
"It's dark," Hannah whispered, pressing close to Grace. "We'll get light. Candles, lanterns, we'll make it bright." Jonas surveyed the space, his mind already calculating what would need to be done. "And warm. There's a fireplace in that corner. We'll get wood, get a fire going. This place could work." "You keep saying we." Eli's voice was sharp. "Why? What do you get out of this?" Jonas turned to face him. "You really want to know?" "Yeah, I really do. Because in my experience, nobody does nothing for nothing. There's always an angle, always a cost. And I need to know what yours is before I let my brothers and sisters get comfortable in a place we might have to run from." The other children had gone quiet, watching the confrontation. Even Hannah stopped fidgeting, sensing the importance of the moment. 5 years ago, Jonas said slowly, I had a family. A wife named Clara. 3 children, Daniel, Sarah, and baby Matthew. We lived in Pennsylvania, in a mining town. I worked the mines during the day and came home to them every night. It wasn't much of a life, but it was mine. It was everything. He paused, gathering himself. Diphtheria came through that winter. Took half the town. Took my wife first, then the children, one by one. I watched them die, Eli. Watched them struggle to breathe. Watched the light go out of their eyes. And there was nothing I could do. Not a single thing. I'm sorry. Grace's voice was barely a whisper. I buried them myself. Dug 4 graves in frozen ground and put my whole world in the dirt. And when it was done, I ran. Started drifting, taking jobs that lasted days instead of weeks, never staying anywhere long enough to care about anything or anyone. I figured if I kept moving, the grief couldn't catch me. If I never stopped, I'd never have to feel it. Jonas met Eli's eyes. It didn't work. The grief followed me everywhere. Every town, every job, every empty room I slept in. I was dead inside, just walking around pretending to be alive. And then yesterday, I saw you. All of you. Huddled against that church like no one in the world cared whether you lived or died. And something broke open in me. Why? We're strangers. Because you looked like my kids would have looked if I'd died instead of them. Scared. Hungry. Waiting for someone to help who was never going to come. Jonas's voice cracked. And I thought maybe this is why I survived when they didn't. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to do with whatever time I've got left. Not run from the grief. Not pretend I don't feel anything. But actually do something. Help someone. Mean something to someone, again. Silence stretched through the abandoned mill. Then Hannah walked over, took Jonas's hand in her small one, and said, I think your children would like us. We could be friends if they were here. Jonas knelt down, bringing himself to her level. I think they would like you too. Grace says when people die, they go to heaven and watch over us. Maybe your children are watching over you right now. Maybe they helped you find us. Maybe they did.
So you'll stay? You'll help us for real?
Jonas looked at this tiny girl with her rag doll and her faith in things she couldn't see, and he felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. Yes, sweetheart, I'll stay. Good, Hannah nodded firmly, because I already told Margaret you were going to teach her about horses, and she doesn't like being disappointed. Jonas laughed, actually laughed, for the first time and longer than he could remember. It was rusty and strange in his throat, but it was real. I'll do my best not to disappoint Margaret. Eli watched this exchange with an expression Jonas couldn't read. When Hannah skipped back to her siblings, the boy approached Jonas slowly.
That story you told.
About your family. Was it true? Every word. And you think helping us is going to, what, make up for losing them? Nothing can make up for that. But maybe helping you can give their deaths some meaning. Give my survival some purpose. Jonas straightened. I don't expect you to trust me. Trust is earned, not given. But I'm asking for a chance to earn it. Can you give me that? Eli was quiet for a long moment.
Fine. You get a chance. But I'm watching you.
I'd expect nothing less. The moment was broken by the sound of horses outside. Multiple horses, moving fast. Jonas tensed immediately, his hand going to his hip, where a gun would be if he still carried one. Stay here, he told the children. All of you. Don't come out until I say. He stepped through the loose board, emerging into the winter sunlight, to find 3 men on horseback. The one in front was older, maybe 50, with silver-streaked hair and clothes that spoke of money. His face had the satisfied expression of a man used to getting what he wanted. Well, well, the man dismounted with practiced ease. You must be the drifter everyone's talking about, the one who took an interest in our local orphans. And you must be Cornelius Wade. My reputation precedes me, Wade smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I've been trying to help those children for months, you know. Offered to take them in, give them work, food, shelter, everything they need. From what I hear, the children you already have working for you don't fare so well. Wade's smile flickered. Idle gossip from people who don't understand the value of hard work. I've given 6 orphans a home over the years, taught them skills, gave them purpose. And bruises, from what the townspeople say. Discipline is part of education. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Wade stepped closer. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because you're trespassing on my property. Your property? The bank foreclosed on this mill 3 months ago. I bought the note. This building belongs to me now. Wade's smile returned, sharper this time. Which means you and those children are squatting, and that's against the law. Jonas felt the ground shift beneath him. Convenient timing, isn't it? I heard you were poking around, looking for somewhere to put those children. So I made some arrangements. Wade shrugged. Business is business. What do you want, Wade? I want what I've always wanted. Those 7 children, working on my ranch, learning the value of labor, being productive members of society instead of beggars on the street. They're not beggars, they're children. Children who need guidance, discipline, structure, things you clearly can't provide. Wade's eyes were cold. Here's the offer, McAllister. Yes, I know your name. I make it my business to know everyone who comes through my town. You walk away now, today, and I'll forget about the trespassing. I'll take those children and give them the upbringing they need. Everyone wins. And if I refuse? Then I have you arrested for trespassing. Maybe theft, too. I'm sure I can find something you've taken. And while you're sitting in Sheriff Cole's jail, I petition the territorial court for custody of those children. Unfit guardian, no fixed address, no visible means of support. The court will have no choice but to grant my petition." Jonas's hands clenched at his sides. "You'd use the law to take children who don't want to go with you?" "The law is a tool, McAllister. Like any tool, it can be used by whoever knows how to wield it." Wade stepped back toward his horse. "You have until tomorrow morning to make your decision. Walk away or face the consequences. Your choice." He mounted up, and his men followed suit. As they rode away, Wade called over his shoulder, "Oh, and McAllister, don't think about running.
I have men watching every road out of town. Those children belong in Elkhorn, and they're going to stay in Elkhorn. The only question is whether they stay with you or with me." Jonas stood in the winter sunlight, watching Wade disappear down the road. His heart pounded. His mind raced. Behind him, in the mill, 7 children waited to find out if the one person who'd stopped to help them was about to abandon them like everyone else. He walked back inside. Eli was standing right by the entrance, having clearly heard every word. His face was set in the hard lines of someone who'd had his worst expectations confirmed. "So that's it then. You leave tomorrow, and we go with Wade." "I never said I was leaving." "You heard him. If you stay, you get arrested. You can't help us from jail." "Maybe not, but I can't help you by walking away either." "At least if you walk away, you're free. You can start over somewhere else, find other people to save." Eli's voice was bitter. "That's what people do. They cut their losses and move on." "That's not what I do. Not anymore." "Why not? It's the smart play. We're not your responsibility. We're not your family. We're just 7 kids you met yesterday." Jonas looked at this boy, this fierce, exhausted, terrified boy, who'd been carrying an impossible weight for 2 years, and felt something solidify in his chest. A decision. A commitment. Yesterday doesn't matter. What matters is today, and tomorrow, and every day after that. I told Hannah I would stay, and I meant it. I'm not walking away from you. Even if it means jail? Wade said I have until tomorrow to decide. That's a lot of hours. A lot can happen. Like what? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. Jonas put his hand on Eli's shoulder, half expecting the boy to pull away. He didn't. You've been fighting alone for 2 years. Let me fight with you. Eli's jaw trembled. For a moment, just a moment, he looked like what he was, a 13-year-old child, scared and tired and desperately wanting someone to lean on. Why? He whispered. Why do you care so much? Because someone should. Because you deserve it. Because my children would have wanted me to. Jonas squeezed his shoulder gently. And because I made a promise to a little girl with a rag doll, and I intend to keep it. The tension in Eli's body slowly released. Not all of it, maybe not even most of it, but some. Enough to matter. What do we do now? Now we make a plan. Wade thinks he's got us cornered, but there's always another way. We just have to find it. They returned to the others, who had gathered around Ben's makeshift bed of old grain sacks. Grace was administering the medicine the doctor had given them, her movements careful and practiced. The twins were pressed together, Sam whispering reassurances to his sick brother. Toby sat apart, lips moving in some private story. Ruth watched from her corner, silent as always. And Hannah had Margaret out, telling the rag doll about the haunted mill and the nice tall man who was going to make everything better. Jonas looked at them, these 7 children who had nothing and no one except each other, and made a silent vow. Whatever it took, whatever he had to do,
He was not going to let Cornelius Wade take them. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. He crossed to where the children had gathered and knelt down among them. I need to tell you all something. The man who was just here, Cornelius Wade, he wants to take you to his ranch. He says he owns this building and we can't stay here. We heard. Grace's voice was tight with fear. Are you going to let him? No. How can you stop him? He's rich. He knows people. He gets whatever he wants. He's never wanted anything as badly as I want to keep you safe. Jonas looked at each child in turn. I know you don't have any reason to trust me. I know I'm just a stranger who showed up yesterday. But I need you to believe me when I say this. I am not going to let that man take you. Whatever happens tomorrow, you're staying together and you're staying free. How? Eli asked. I don't have all the answers yet, but I know people who might. The doctor, Mercer, he seemed like a good man. And the woman at the general store, she wasn't happy about how the town's treated you. There might be others, people who want to help but don't know how, or who've been too scared of Wade to try. You think you can build an army in one night? Not an army, a community. There's a difference. Hannah tugged at his sleeve. What about Mrs. Morrison? She's nice. She let us sleep in her barn. And Henderson at the livery, Toby added, emerging from his storytelling trance. He didn't have to let us stay last night, but he did. And the preacher, Grace said slowly. Reverend Hartley. He's always talking about charity and helping the least of these. But he's never done much about it. Maybe he's just been waiting for someone to show him how. Jonas felt something stir in his chest. These children, despite everything they'd been through, still believed in the possibility of good, still remembered kindness, even when it was rare. That faith deserved to be rewarded. Tomorrow morning, he said, I'm going to talk to everyone you mentioned, and anyone else who might listen. Wade thinks this town belongs to him, but towns are made of people, and people can change their minds. And if they don't, Eli's voice was quiet. Then we'll find another way. But we won't know until we try. Jonas stood. For now, let's focus on tonight. We need to make this place livable. Firewood, blankets, food. Ben needs to rest, and the rest of you need to eat. I can help gather wood, Sam offered. Me too, said Toby. Grace, you stay here with Ben and Hannah. Ruth. Jonas paused, looking at the silent girl. Ruth, would you keep watch? You notice things other people miss. If anyone comes near this building, I want to know. Ruth's eyes widened slightly, surprised at being given a task, at being seen as capable of something specific. After a moment, she nodded once, firmly. Eli, you're with me. We're going to find out exactly what we're up against. You're bringing me? You know this town better than I do. You know who to trust and who to avoid. I need that knowledge. Something shifted in Eli's expression. Not trust, not yet, but something approaching respect. All right, let's go. They left the mill together, Jonas and Eli, stepping out into a world that had declared itself their enemy. The sun was climbing higher now, but it gave no warmth. The wind still cut like knives. And somewhere in town, Cornelius Wade was preparing his next move. But Jonas had made moves before, had survived things that should have killed him, had buried his children, and kept breathing, even when breathing felt impossible. He could do this. He had to do this, because 7 children were counting on him, and he was not going to let them down. The town of Elkhorn looked different when you were walking through it with purpose instead of just passing by. Jonas noticed things he'd missed before. The way certain people avoided eye contact. The nervous glances toward the road that led to Wade's ranch. The silence that fell whenever the children's situation was mentioned. Eli walked beside him, pointing out landmarks in a low voice. "That's the sheriff's office. Cole's been Wade's man for years. Won't help us. The church is where Reverend Hartley preaches about Christian charity every Sunday morning, then goes home and forgets about it. The schoolhouse is past that, but we haven't been allowed inside since Pa died." "Why not?" "Teacher said we were disruptive. Said we smelled bad and distracted the other children." Eli's voice was flat. "We stopped trying after a while." "Who's the teacher?" "Miss Stone, Abigail Stone. She's a widow. Came here a few years back after her husband died." Eli shrugged. "She's not mean, exactly, just careful. Everyone in this town is careful when it comes to us." They reached the general store first. The same woman from yesterday was behind the counter, and her face went through several expressions when she saw Jonas enter with Eli. "Mr. McAllister! And young Brennan!" "Mrs. Hendricks," Jonas stepped forward. "I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." "I'm always honest." "Then tell me, is there anyone in this town who'd stand up against Cornelius Wade?" The question hung in the air. Mrs. Hendricks's hand stilled on the ledger she'd been writing in. She looked at Eli, then back at Jonas. "Why do you ask?" "Because he's coming for these children tomorrow. He's going to use the law to take them, and if no one stands against him, he's going to succeed. What he does is legal. Those children need guardianship, and he's offering it. What he does is slavery, dressed up in pretty words. You know it. I know it. Everyone in this town knows it." Jonas leaned forward. "The question is whether anyone's going to do something about it." Mrs. Hendricks was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "My husband worked for Wade once. Years ago, before the children started coming to his ranch. He saw things. The way Wade treats people he considers beneath him. The way he uses the law like a weapon." She paused. "My husband quit. Took a pay cut to work at the mine instead. Said he couldn't stomach it anymore. So you understand. I understand that going against Cornelius Wade is dangerous. He owns the bank. He owns the sheriff. He owns half the buildings in this town. People who cross him find their loans called in, their businesses failing, their reputations destroyed. And people who don't cross him get to watch children suffer." Mrs. Hendricks flinched. "That's not fair." "Neither is what's happening to those kids." Jonas straightened. "I'm not asking you to lead a revolution. I'm asking you to tell the truth when the time comes. To stand up and say what everyone knows but no one wants to admit. Can you do that?" I don't know." "Think about it. That's all I ask." They left the general store and moved on. Dr. Mercer was their next stop, and he listened to Jonas's account of Wade's visit with growing anger. "That man is a plague on this town. I've treated the children who work for him. Malnutrition. Injuries that should have healed weeks ago, but didn't because they weren't allowed to rest. Fear so deep it's carved into their bones." Mercer's hands clenched. "I've written letters to the territorial authorities. Nothing ever comes of them. Would you testify if it came to a hearing?" "In a heartbeat. But my word alone won't be enough. Wade has powerful friends. He'll bring in character witnesses, community leaders, everyone who owes him money or favors." Mercer shook his head. "You'd need an army to stand against him." "I don't need an army. I need people who aren't afraid to tell the truth. In this town, that might as well be an army." Their next stop was the church. Reverend Hartley was inside, arranging hymnals in the pews, and he looked up with surprise when Jonas and Eli entered. "Mr. McAllister, young Eli, what brings you to the house of God?" "A question, Reverend. About the children you've been preaching about helping. Hartley's expression flickered. The Brennan children. Yes, a tragic situation. I've mentioned them in my sermons many times. Mentioned them, but what have you done? I've encouraged the congregation to give, to open their hearts.
And when no one opened their hearts, what then? Did you take them in yourself? Did you advocate for them? Did you stand against the man who wants to use them as labor?
Hartley's face reddened. Mr. McAllister, you don't understand the complexities of this situation. Mr. Wade is a generous donor to this church. He's promised to fund the new roof we desperately need. If I were to oppose him publicly, then your roof might not get built. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Jonas stepped closer. You preach about charity and compassion every Sunday. You tell your congregation to help the least of these. But when the least of these are freezing outside your church, you count your donations and worry about your roof. That's unfair. Is it? Those children spent 17 nights sleeping against your church wall. Did you invite them inside? Did you give them blankets? Did you do anything except mention them in your sermons? Hartley had no answer.
His face was a mixture of guilt and defensiveness, the expression of a man who knew he'd failed, but didn't want to admit it.
Tomorrow morning, Jonas said, Wade is going to try to take those children. He's going to use the law and his money and his influence. And if no one stands against him, he's going to succeed. You can keep preaching about charity while children suffer, or you can actually practice what you preach. Your choice. He turned and walked out, Eli following close behind. Outside, the boy looked at him with something new in his eyes. No one's ever talked to Reverend Hartley like that. Maybe someone should have, a long time ago. He won't help. He's too scared of Wade. Maybe. Or maybe he's been waiting for someone to remind him what his faith is actually supposed to mean. Jonas started walking toward the schoolhouse. One more stop. The schoolhouse was a small building with frosted windows and a thin trail of smoke rising from its chimney. Jonas could hear children's voices inside, reciting multiplication tables in unison. He knocked on the door. It opened to reveal a woman in her mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and intelligent eyes that assessed Jonas quickly and thoroughly. She was beautiful, Jonas noticed, in a way that had nothing to do with prettiness and everything to do with presence. Can I help you? Miss Stone? Mrs. Stone, though my husband passed 2 years ago. I'm Jonas McAllister. I'm here about the Brennan children. Something shifted in her expression. The ones who were told they couldn't attend school anymore? That's them. That decision wasn't mine. The school board, which is controlled by Mr. Wade, incidentally, decided their presence was disruptive. Her voice was carefully neutral, but Jonas heard the frustration beneath it. I protested for what it was worth.
Would you protest again? Publicly? Abigail Stone looked past Jonas to where Eli stood, thin and wary, and watching her with eyes that expected nothing. Something broke in her expression. Come inside, she said. Both of you. We need to talk. The schoolroom was warm, filled with the scent of chalk and children. The students, about 15 of them, ranging from 6 to 14, stared at Jonas and Eli with open curiosity. Class, continue with your arithmetic. Quietly. Abigail led Jonas and Eli to a corner near the potbelly stove. Now, tell me what's happening. Jonas told her, about Wade's ultimatum, about the mill, about the deadline tomorrow morning. Abigail listened without interrupting, her face growing more troubled with each word. I've tried to help those children, she said when he finished. I've brought them food when I could. Tried to convince the board to let them return to school. But Wade has made it clear that anyone who interferes with his plans
will face consequences. What kind of consequences? Last year, a family named Patterson tried to take in the two youngest McCarthy children. Within a month, their farm had burned down. Accident, according to Sheriff Cole. But everyone knew better. Abigail's voice was bitter. The Pattersons moved away. No one else has tried since. So people want to help. They're just afraid. Terrified. Wade has spent years making sure anyone who challenges him pays a price. She looked at Eli. I'm sorry, young man. I should have done more. Eli's expression didn't change. Everybody's sorry. Sorry doesn't keep us warm. You're right, it doesn't. Abigail straightened. What do you need from me? Come to the mill after school. Bring anyone you trust. We're going to make that place livable. And we're going to show Wade that these children have people willing to fight for them. That's not much of a plan.
It's what I have. Will you come?
Abigail looked at Eli again, at this boy who'd been failed by every adult in his life, and Jonas saw her make a decision. I'll be there. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Jonas sent Eli back to the mill to watch over the others while he gathered supplies. Wood for the fire, food for dinner, blankets from Henderson at the livery, who refused to take payment. By late afternoon, he had a wagon full of everything 7 children would need to survive the night. When he arrived at the mill, he found a transformation underway. Grace had organized the younger children into a cleaning crew. Hannah was sweeping with a broom twice her size, humming tunelessly to herself. The twins were carrying debris outside, working together with the silent coordination that only twins possessed. Toby was in the corner, drawing something on a piece of salvaged paper with a charcoal stub. Even Ruth was helping, sorting through piles of old equipment and separating what was useful from what was trash. She looked up when Jonas entered, and for just a moment, the ghost of something, approval maybe, flickered across her face. Only Eli stood apart, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, watching everything without participating. Jonas unloaded the supplies, setting up a proper fire in the old fireplace, hanging blankets to create private sleeping areas, arranging food on a makeshift table. The children gathered around as he worked, drawn by the smell of bread and the warmth of the flames. You brought so much, Grace said, wonder in her voice. How did you afford all this? Henderson helped. So did a few others. Turns out there are people in this town who want to do the right thing. They just needed someone to show them how. Will it be enough to stop Wade? I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. Abigail Stone arrived as the sun was setting, her arms full of books and slates. Behind her came Dr. Mercer with more medicine for Ben, and Henderson with extra blankets he'd found in his storage room. Even Mrs. Hendricks appeared, carrying a pot of stew she claimed was left over, but was clearly freshly made. The children stared at this parade of adults as if they were witnessing a miracle, which, in a way, they were. After months of being ignored, suddenly people were showing up, bringing things, helping. I don't understand, Eli said, his voice rough. Why now? Why today? We've been here all along. Sometimes it takes a spark to start a fire, Abigail said gently. Mr. McAllister is the spark. The rest of us were just waiting for a reason to burn. That's a nice metaphor, but metaphors don't stop Wade. No, they don't. Actions do. Abigail set down her books, which is why I'm going to start teaching you and your siblings again. Tonight. Right here. You can't do that. The school board can take their rules and use them for kindling. Abigail's voice was fierce. I became a teacher because I believe every child deserves an education. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I let fear make me forget. But I'm remembering now. She gathered the children around her, pulling out primers and slates, and began to teach. It was simple stuff: letters for Hannah, arithmetic for the twins, geography for Toby. But the children absorbed it like dry ground absorbing rain. They were hungry for it, Jonas realized. Hungry for someone to believe they were worth teaching. While Abigail worked with the children, Jonas found himself standing with Dr. Mercer and Henderson, watching the scene unfold. "This is good," Mercer said quietly. "This is what should have been happening all along." "It's not enough," Henderson replied. "Wade isn't going to back down because we taught some kids their letters." "No, but it's a start." Jonas turned to them. "Tomorrow morning, Wade is going to come here with the sheriff and probably some legal papers. He's going to try to take these children. What happens next depends on who's standing against him. You're asking us to put everything on the line. I'm asking you to do what's right. There's a difference." Henderson and Mercer exchanged glances. Some unspoken communication passed between them. "We'll be here," Mercer said. "Whatever happens." "So will I," Henderson added. "I'm too old to be scared of Cornelius Wade anymore." The evening passed in something approaching peace. The fire crackled. The children learned their lessons. The adults talked quietly about plans and possibilities. For a few hours, the old mill felt almost like a home. Then Ben started coughing again. It was worse this time. Deep, racking coughs that bent him double and left him gasping for breath. Grace rushed to his side with the medicine, but even after taking it, the coughing continued. His face was flushed with fever, his breathing shallow and labored. Mercer pushed through the gathered children and knelt beside Ben. His expression grew grave as he listened to the boy's chest. "It's progressing faster than I hoped. He needs to be somewhere warmer, cleaner. The dust in this building isn't helping." "There's nowhere else to go," Eli said, his voice tight with fear he was trying to hide. "My house," Abigail stepped forward. "I have a spare room, clean, warm, quiet. Ben can stay there until he's better." "Wade will know," Henderson warned. "He's got eyes everywhere." "Let him know. Let him come to my house and try to take a sick child from a widow." Abigail's chin lifted. "I'd like to see him try." They wrapped Ben in blankets and carried him carefully to Abigail's house, a small cottage near the schoolhouse. Sam refused to leave his twin's side, and Grace insisted on coming to administer the medicine properly. That left Hannah, Toby, Ruth, and Eli at the mill with Jonas. "They're taking him away," Hannah said, her voice small. "Are they going to take all of us away?" "No, sweetheart. Ben's just going somewhere warm so he can get better. He'll be back as soon as he's well." "Promise?" "I promise." But Eli was watching the door where his siblings had disappeared, and his face was a mask of barely controlled panic. Jonas crossed to him, putting a hand on his shoulder. "He's going to be okay." "You don't know that. You can't know that." "You're right. I can't. But Mercer is a good doctor, and Abigail will take care of him, and Grace won't let anything happen to him." Jonas squeezed his shoulder. "You've been carrying this weight alone for so long. Let other people help carry it." Eli's composure cracked. Just for a moment, the wall he'd built around himself crumbled, and Jonas saw the terrified boy underneath. "I can't lose them. Any of them. They're all I have." "I know. If Ben dies, if Wade takes the others, I'll have nothing. I'll be nothing." "That's not true. You'll still be the boy who kept 6 children alive for 2 years. The boy who stood in front of them and dared the world to try to hurt them. That's not nothing. That's everything." Eli's eyes were bright with tears he refused to let fall. "I'm so tired." "I know that too." "I don't want to be in charge anymore. I don't want to make all the decisions and worry about everyone and never sleep because someone might need me." "Then stop. Just for tonight. Let me worry. Let me stay awake. Let me be the one who watches the door."
I can't. If I stop even for a minute, everything will fall apart.
It won't. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Eli looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted. Some wall, some defense, some piece of armor he'd been wearing for so long he'd forgotten it was there.
Why do you care so much? We're not your family.
Maybe not by blood, but family isn't just blood. Family is who you choose to stand beside when everything goes wrong. Jonas met his eyes steadily. I'm choosing to stand beside you, if you'll let me. The tears Eli had been fighting finally spilled over, silent tears, tracking down his face, washing away years of grief and fear and loneliness. Jonas pulled him into a hug, and the boy collapsed against him, sobbing like the child he'd never been allowed to be. They stood like that for a long time. The 13-year-old who'd been forced to grow up too fast, and the man who'd lost everything and found a reason to keep going. When Eli finally pulled back, wiping his face with his sleeve, something had changed between them.
I'm sorry,
Eli mumbled.
I don't usually...
Don't apologize. You needed that. Probably needed it for a long time.
What happens now?
Now you sleep. Really sleep. I'll keep watch.
And tomorrow?
Tomorrow we face whatever comes. Together. Eli nodded slowly. He moved to where Hannah and Toby were already asleep, curled together in a nest of blankets. He lay down beside them, and within minutes, his breathing had deepened into the rhythm of true rest. Jonas settled into his position by the door and watched the children sleep. Hannah with her rag doll, Toby with his dreams. Ruth in her corner, still awake, still watching. And Eli, finally at peace. Sometime during the night, Ruth moved. She crossed the room silently and sat down near Jonas, close enough that he could feel her presence, but not so close that she was touching him. She didn't speak, of course she didn't, but she was there, keeping watch with him. Thank you, Jonas said quietly, for standing guard with me. Ruth didn't respond, but she leaned slightly toward him, the smallest gesture of trust. They sat together in the darkness, two people who understood loss, who knew what it was to watch everything you loved disappear. And somewhere in that shared silence, Jonas felt something healing. Just before dawn, there was a knock at the mill door. Jonas tensed, his hand going to the makeshift weapon he'd fashioned from a piece of iron pipe. But when he opened the door, it wasn't Wade's men standing there. It was Reverend Hartley, his face gray with exhaustion and something else. Determination, maybe, or shame finally becoming action. I couldn't sleep, the Reverend said quietly. I kept thinking about what you said, about preaching charity while children suffered. He swallowed. I've been a coward. I've let fear guide my actions instead of faith. And I'm done. What are you saying? I'm saying I'll be here tomorrow, when Wade comes. I'll stand against him, whatever it costs. Jonas felt something ease in his chest. One more person, one more voice, one more chance. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm only doing what I should have done months ago. Hartley looked past Jonas to the sleeping children. They deserve better than what this town has given them. They deserve champions. They have them now. The Reverend nodded and turned to go. But before he left, he said, There's something else. Something you should know. Cornelius Wade wasn't always the man he is now. He had a daughter once. She died young. Fever, like your children. What does that have to do with anything? I don't know exactly, but grief does strange things to people. It turned you into a wanderer. Maybe it turned him into a monster. Hartley paused. Understanding isn't excusing, but it might help you find a way to reach him, if reaching him is even possible. He walked away into the pre-dawn darkness, leaving Jonas with more questions than answers. The morning sun was just beginning to paint the sky when Toby woke up and brought Jonas something. It was the drawing he'd been working on all day, a picture on salvaged paper done in charcoal. It showed a house. Not the mill, but a real house, with windows and a chimney and smoke rising into the sky. In front of the house stood 8 figures, 7 children of various sizes, and 1 tall man standing behind them with his arms spread wide. At the bottom, in careful letters, Toby had written 2 words, "Our family." Jonas stared at the drawing, at this vision of a future that might never exist, created by a 9-year-old boy who still believed in happy endings despite everything he'd been through.
"Do you like it?"
Toby asked, his voice small.
"I know it's not very good. I don't have real paper or proper pencils, but I wanted to show you what I see when I close my eyes, what I hope for."
Jonas's throat was too tight to speak. He pulled Toby into a hug, holding the boy close, feeling the fragile hope in that small body. "It's perfect," he managed. "It's absolutely perfect."
"Do you think it could be real? The house, I mean? All of us, together?"
"I don't know, but I'm going to do everything I can to make it real."
"Promise?"
"I promise." Toby smiled, the bright, uncomplicated smile of a child who'd decided to believe. Then he went to help Hannah wake up, leaving Jonas holding the drawing like it was made of gold. Ruth had moved to the window, looking out at the road that led to town. Her body was tense, alert. "What is it?" Jonas asked. She pointed. In the distance, a group of riders was approaching. At the front, unmistakable even from here, rode Cornelius Wade. The deadline had arrived. Jonas tucked Toby's drawing into his coat pocket and moved to the door. Behind him, the children were waking, sensing the tension in the air. Eli was already on his feet, positioning himself between his siblings and whatever was coming. "Stay inside," Jonas said. "All of you. No matter what happens, stay inside."
"You can't face them alone," Eli protested.
"I won't be alone. Just trust me." He stepped outside into the cold morning air. Wade and his men had stopped about 50 yards from the mill. Behind them, Jonas could see Sheriff Cole on horseback, his badge glinting in the weak sunlight. And behind Cole, more figures were approaching from town. Dr. Mercer arrived first, on foot, his medical bag clutched in one hand. Then Henderson, leading a horse that looked like it hadn't been ridden in years. Reverend Hartley came next, his black coat billowing in the wind. And finally, walking together with quiet determination, Abigail Stone and Mrs. Hendricks. Wade watched this gathering with an expression of amused contempt. "Well, well, looks like you've assembled quite a welcoming committee, McAllister. Though I'm not sure what you think a doctor, a preacher, and a couple of women are going to do against the law." "The law isn't on your side, Wade. It's on the side of these children. These children are orphans with no legal guardian. I'm offering to provide that guardianship. The court will see it as an act of charity. The court will see it as what it is, exploitation dressed up in legal papers." Wade's smile flickered. "Be careful, McAllister. Slander is a serious accusation. So is child abuse. And I've got a doctor right here who's treated the children you've already taken in, who's seen the malnutrition and the injuries and the fear." Mercer stepped forward. "I have documentation, medical records of every child I've treated from your ranch. Broken bones that weren't set properly, burns that weren't cleaned, infections that went untreated for weeks." His voice shook with controlled anger. "You can call it discipline if you want. I call it cruelty."
Something dangerous flickered in Wade's eyes. "Dr. Mercer, I'd advise you to consider your position very carefully. Medical practices in frontier towns can be unpredictable. Accidents happen."
Is that a threat, Mr. Wade?
It's an observation.
Then here's mine. Mercer didn't flinch. I've spent 3 years in this town watching you operate. Watching good people stay silent because they were afraid. I was one of them. I'm not anymore. Sheriff Cole shifted uncomfortably on his horse. Now, folks, let's all calm down. Mr. Wade has filed a legal petition for guardianship of these children. That's his right under territorial law. If you have objections, you can raise them at the hearing.
"What hearing?" Jonas demanded.
Scheduled for 3 days from now. Judge Morrison is riding in from Cheyenne to preside. Cole pulled a folded paper from his coat. In the meantime, this is a court order requiring the children to remain in Elkhorn until the matter is settled. No one's to take them anywhere.
"They're not going anywhere. This is their home now."
This mill? Wade laughed. This abandoned, condemned building that I happen to own? That's what you're calling a home?
"It's more of a home than your ranch would ever be."
Wade dismounted, walking toward Jonas with deliberate slowness. His men stayed on their horses, hands resting casually on their weapons. "Let me explain something to you, McAllister. I've built everything I have through hard work and determination. I've brought prosperity to this town. I've given jobs to people who had nothing. And yes, I've taken in orphan children and taught them the value of labor." He stopped a few feet from Jonas, his voice dropping. "You're a drifter, a nobody, a man with no property, no family, no standing in this community. What exactly do you think you can offer those children that I can't?" Love. The word hung in the cold air. Wade's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe. Or something deeper. "Love," he repeated. "That's a pretty sentiment. But love doesn't feed hungry bellies. Love doesn't put clothes on their backs or roofs over their heads. You're right. Love alone isn't enough. But love combined with people who actually care?" Jonas gestured to the group gathered behind him. "That's a start. These people?" Wade's contempt was palpable. "A broken-down doctor, a cowardly preacher, a widow and a shopkeeper? That's your army? It's a community, something you've never understood. I understand plenty. I understand that in 3 days a judge is going to look at the facts. A wealthy rancher offering a stable home versus a homeless drifter squatting in an abandoned building. What do you think he's going to decide?" Jonas didn't have an answer for that. Because Wade was right. On paper, there was no contest. No judge would choose a stranger with nothing over a pillar of the community. "That's what I thought." Wade turned back toward his horse. 3 days, McAllister. Enjoy them. Because after that, those children become mine. He mounted up and rode away, his men following. Sheriff Cole lingered for a moment, something that might have been regret crossing his face. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I don't like this any more than you do. But the law is the law. The law is supposed to protect the innocent, not deliver them to people who'll hurt them. That's above my pay grade. I just enforce what the courts decide." Cole touched his hat in a brief salute and rode after Wade. The group stood in silence, watching them go. Then Mrs. Hendricks said what everyone was thinking. 3 days? What can we possibly do in 3 days? "Build a case," Abigail said. "Gather testimony. Find anyone who's willing to speak against Wade. Most people are too afraid. Then we find the ones who aren't." Jonas turned to face them, these unlikely allies who'd gathered in the cold to stand with him. "I know this seems impossible. Wade has money, power, connections. We have nothing except each other. But those children in there have survived things that would break most adults. They deserve someone fighting for them. They deserve a chance. "What do you need us to do?" Henderson asked. "Talk to people. Find anyone who's had dealings with Wade's ranch. Former workers, families who've lost children to him, anyone with first-hand knowledge of how he treats people. Mercer, your medical records are crucial. Document everything. Dates, injuries, treatments. I can do that. Reverend, you know this community better than anyone. You know who has a conscience hiding under their fear. Find them. Remind them what their faith is supposed to mean." Hartley nodded slowly. "I'll do my best. And Mrs. Stone, you said there was a family, the Pattersons, who tried to take in some of the children before. Their farm burned down. They moved away. I don't know where. Find out. Track them down. If they'll testify about what Wade did to them, it could help prove a pattern."
That's a lot to accomplish in 3 days. "Then we'd better get started." The group dispersed, each person heading off with a purpose. Jonas watched them go, then turned back toward the mill. The children had gathered at the windows, watching everything. He went inside. Eli met him first, his face pale. "We heard. There's going to be a hearing." "In 3 days. The judge will decide who gets guardianship."
"And Wade's going to win. He always wins."
"Not this time."
"How can you be so sure?"
"I'm not sure. I'm just not willing to give up." Hannah pushed through her siblings and wrapped her arms around Jonas's leg.
"I don't want to go with that man. He has mean eyes."
"You're not going with him. None of you are."
"Promise?"
That word again. The weight of promises made to children. Promises that might be impossible to keep. "I promise I'll do everything I can." Everything. The next 2 days were a blur of activity. Jonas worked on the mill, making it as livable as possible, while the others gathered information and testimony. Mercer compiled his medical records into a devastating document of abuse. Henderson found 2 former workers from Wade's ranch who were willing to speak about conditions there. Abigail tracked down the Pattersons to a town 200 miles east and sent a telegram begging them to respond. The children helped where they could. Grace kept everyone fed and organized. Toby drew pictures to keep Hannah calm. Even Ruth participated, sorting supplies and keeping watch at the windows. Only Eli withdrew. As the hearing approached, he became more and more distant, spending hours sitting alone in the corner, refusing to engage. Jonas tried to reach him several times, but the boy pushed him away. "What's the point?" Eli said when Jonas pressed. "Wade's going to win. He always wins. And then you'll leave like everyone else, and we'll be stuck with him forever." "I'm not leaving."
"You say that now, but when the judge rules against us, when there's nothing more you can do, you'll go. You'll have to. It's what people do."
"It's not what I do."
"You don't know that. You've never been tested."
Jonas didn't have an answer for that either, because Eli was right. He'd never had to stay when staying meant losing. He'd always been able to run, to find somewhere new, to escape. But this time, there was nowhere to escape to. These children had become his world. Losing them would be worse than any loss he'd suffered before. The night before the hearing, a blizzard hit. Snow and wind battered the mill, howling through gaps in the walls, threatening to extinguish the fire. The children huddled together, frightened by the violence of the storm. Jonas did a head count. Grace, Hannah, Toby, Ruth. The twins were still at Abigail's house with Ben, who was recovering slowly.
"Where's Eli?"
Grace looked around, alarm crossing her face.
"He was here just a minute ago. He said he was going to check the back door."
Jonas moved through the mill, searching every corner. The back door stood open, snow swirling through it. "Eli!" he shouted into the storm. "Eli!"
No response. Just the roar of the wind. "Stay here," he told Grace. "Keep everyone together. Don't open the door for anyone except me."
"Where are you going?"
"To find your brother." Jonas plunged into the blizzard. The cold was immediate and brutal, cutting through his coat like it wasn't there. Visibility was almost zero. He could barely see his own hands in front of his face. "Eli, where are you?" He struggled forward, following what he hoped were tracks in the snow. The wind erased them almost as fast as they were made, but he caught glimpses. A depression here, a scuff mark there. The trail led toward the hills behind the mill. Why would Eli go that way? There was nothing out there except wilderness and death. Unless that was the point. The thought struck Jonas like a physical blow. Eli had been withdrawing for days, had been talking about everything being hopeless, about Jonas leaving, about nothing ever changing. What if he'd decided to end it on his own terms? Jonas moved faster, pushing through snowdrifts that reached his thighs, calling Eli's name until his voice went hoarse. The cold was seeping into his bones now, slowing his movements, clouding his thoughts. He'd lived through enough Wyoming winters to know the danger. Hypothermia could kill in hours, less for a 13-year-old boy without proper clothing. He almost missed him. A dark shape huddled against a rock, barely visible through the swirling snow. Jonas stumbled toward it, his heart pounding. "Eli!" The boy looked up. His face was pale, his lips blue, his eyes vacant with the first stages of shock. "Go away." Like hell. Jonas dropped to his knees beside him, pulling off his own coat and wrapping it around Eli's shoulders.
"What are you doing out here?"
"I don't know. I had to get out. I couldn't breathe in there, with everyone hoping and planning like it was going to make a difference. It's not going to make a difference. Nothing ever makes a difference." "So you decided to freeze to death?" "I wasn't trying to, Eli's voice broke. "I can't watch it happen again. I can't watch another person promise to help and then fail. I can't watch you realize that it's hopeless and walk away." "I'm not walking away." "You will. Everyone does. My mother promised she'd come back. She didn't. My father promised he'd stop drinking. He didn't. Mrs. Morrison promised she'd take us in. She didn't. Everyone promises, and then they leave, and we're still here, still alone, still waiting." Jonas sat down in the snow beside him, ignoring the cold that was now biting into his own skin. "You're right." Eli looked at him, confused. "What?" "You're right. People leave. People break promises. People fail." Jonas met his eyes. "I've done all of those things. I left my home after my family died. I broke promises to myself about never caring about anyone again. I've failed more times than I can count. Then why should I believe you're different?" "Because I'm not different. I'm just choosing to try anyway." Jonas took a breath, feeling the cold burn his lungs. "When my wife and children died, I thought my life was over. I wanted it to be over. For weeks, I looked for ways to make it over. Dangerous jobs, bad situations, anything that might kill me so I didn't have to feel the pain anymore." Eli was watching him now, really watching. "But I didn't die. No matter what I did, I kept waking up every morning. And after a while, I realized that survival wasn't a choice. It was just what happened. The choice was what to do with the survival. Whether to keep running and hurting and waiting to die, or whether to find something worth living for." "And you found us." "I found you." 7 children who reminded me that pain isn't the end of the story, that loss doesn't have to define everything that comes after. Jonas put his hand on Eli's shoulder. "I can't promise I'll never fail. I can't promise that tomorrow's hearing will go our way. but I can promise that I will never stop fighting for you. Never. As long as I'm breathing, you have someone in your corner. Why? Why do you care so much? Because you're worth caring about. All of you. Because my children would have wanted me to keep living, keep loving, keep trying. And because somewhere along the way, you became my family. Not by blood, but by choice. And that's the strongest kind of family there is. Eli was crying now, tears freezing on his cheeks. I'm so tired. I'm so tired of being strong. Then let me be strong for a while. Let me carry some of the weight. What if you can't carry it either? Then we'll collapse together, and we'll get back up together. That's what family does. Eli leaned against him, sobbing, and Jonas held him as the blizzard raged around them. Two people who'd been broken by loss, finding each other in the darkness, holding on when letting go would have been easier. We need to get back, Jonas said finally, before we both freeze to death. I don't know if I can walk. Then I'll carry you. And he did. Jonas lifted Eli onto his back and started the long trudge back toward the mill, fighting through snow that tried to swallow them both. His legs burned, his arms screamed. His lungs felt like they were full of ice, but he kept moving, one step at a time, because Eli was counting on him, and he was not going to let this boy down. The mill appeared through the snow like a beacon. Light glowed from the windows. Someone had built the fire back up, made it bright enough to guide them home. Grace was at the door the moment Jonas kicked it open. Eli! Oh God, Eli! He's okay. He's just cold. Jonas set Eli down near the fire, and the other children immediately surrounded him, piling blankets on top of him, rubbing his hands, pressing close to share their warmth. What were you thinking? Grace demanded through tears. You could have died. I know. Eli's voice was small. I'm sorry. I couldn't. Don't ever do that again. Don't you ever leave us like that again. I won't. I promise. Grace looked up at Jonas, something fierce and grateful in her eyes. You went after him. In that storm. You could have died too. Wasn't going to let him face it alone. No one's ever done that before, gone into danger for us. Then it was long overdue. Jonas sat down heavily, exhaustion hitting him all at once. Hannah crawled into his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. You saved Eli. We saved each other. Margaret says you're a hero, a real hero, like in stories. I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I'm just a man who decided to stop running. Ruth appeared at his side. She held something out to him, a cup of water, warmed by the fire. Her eyes met his, and for just a moment, something passed between them. Understanding, gratitude, connection. Thank you, Jonas said. Ruth nodded once. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she spoke. Stay. One word. The first word she'd said in 14 months. The word she'd written with her actions all along, now finally breaking free from whatever prison her grief had built. The room went silent. Everyone stared at Ruth, at this miracle of sound from a girl they'd thought might never speak again. What did you say? Grace whispered. Ruth looked at Jonas, her eyes bright with tears she'd been holding back for over a year. Stay, she said again, louder this time. Please, stay with us. Jonas felt his own eyes fill. He reached out and took Ruth's hand. I'm not going anywhere. Ruth's face crumpled, and for the first time since the fire that killed her parents, she cried. Real tears, released at last. 14 months of grief and fear and silence pouring out. Grace gathered her into her arms, and the other children pressed close, and they all cried together, for what they'd lost, for what they'd found, for the fragile hope that tomorrow might be different. Jonas sat among them, these 7 children who'd become his family, and let himself feel something he'd denied himself for 5 years. He was home. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cold, the blizzard having blown itself out during the night. Jonas dressed carefully, putting on the cleanest clothes he owned, which wasn't saying much. The children did the same, Grace helping Hannah with her braids, Eli standing taller than he had in days. Even Ruth was different. She didn't speak again, but her silence had changed. It was no longer a wall. It was a choice. They walked into town together, all 7 children and Jonas. Along the way, people emerged from their homes to join them.
Henderson fell into step first, then Mercer with his stack of documents, then Reverend Hartley in his Sunday best. Abigail Stone joined them with news. The Pattersons had wired back. They would testify by telegram, describing in detail what Wade had done to their farm after they'd tried to help the McCarthy children. Even Mrs. Hendricks was there, walking beside her husband, her chin lifted in defiance of whatever consequences might come. By the time they reached the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, more people than Jonas had seen in Elkhorn before. Many he recognized from his days of canvassing, people who'd been too afraid to speak, now standing in solidarity. Wade was already there with his lawyers and his men. His expression when he saw the crowd was priceless. Shock, then anger, then something that might have been fear. "What is this?" he demanded. "This is a community," Jonas said. "Something you've never understood." The doors to the courthouse opened, and Judge Morrison appeared. He was an older man with white hair and keen eyes that took in the scene before him with evident interest.
"Ladies and gentlemen, the hearing will begin in 15 minutes. All parties with relevant testimony should make themselves known to the clerk." Jonas looked at the children gathered around him, at Eli, standing straight, at Grace, holding Hannah's hand, at the twins, reunited now that Ben was better, at Toby with his drawings, at Ruth with her hard-won words. "Whatever happens in there," he said quietly, "remember this. You are wanted. You are loved. You are family." Hannah squeezed his hand. "Margaret says we're going to win." "Then Margaret must be pretty smart." "She's the smartest ragdoll in Wyoming." Jonas laughed, despite everything, despite the fear and the uncertainty, and the knowledge that the next few hours would determine whether they stayed together or were torn apart. He laughed because a 4-year-old girl with an imaginary friend still believed in happy endings. And maybe, just maybe, so did he. They walked into the courthouse together. The courtroom was smaller than Jonas expected, but it felt enormous with so many people packed inside. Wooden benches lined both sides of the aisle, and at the front, Judge Morrison sat behind a raised desk, his white hair gleaming in the light from the windows. Wade sat on one side with his lawyers, 2 men in expensive suits who looked like they'd never done an honest day's work in their lives. On the other side sat Jonas and the children, with Mercer, Abigail, and the others crowded in behind them. "This hearing will come to order," Judge Morrison said, his voice carrying through the room. "We are here to determine the matter of guardianship for the minor children known as Elijah, Grace, Tobias, Ruth, Samuel, Benjamin, and Hannah. Mr. Wade has filed a petition claiming he can provide proper care. Mr. McAllister has filed a counter-petition. Both parties will have opportunity to present their case." Wade's lawyer stood first. He was smooth, polished, every word calculated for maximum effect. "Your Honor, my client is one of the most successful ranchers in Wyoming Territory. He has the means, the resources, and the experience to provide these unfortunate children with everything they need: food, shelter, education, discipline. He has taken in orphan children before and turned them into productive members of society." "Objection!" Jonas stood, surprising himself with the steadiness of his voice. "I'd like to hear from some of those productive members of society." The lawyer smirked. Mr. McAllister, this isn't a criminal trial. There are no objections. Then consider it a request. Jonas turned to the judge. Your Honor, I have testimony from former workers at Wade's ranch. Testimony about how children are actually treated there.
Judge Morrison's eyes sharpened with interest. Proceed, Mr. McAllister.
Henderson was the first to step forward. His voice was rough but clear as he described what he'd seen during his time working for Wade. Children working dawn to dusk, meals withheld as punishment, beatings for minor infractions. I quit after 3 months, Henderson said. Couldn't stomach it anymore. Those kids weren't being raised, they were being broken. Wade's lawyer tried to dismiss the testimony as hearsay, but Mercer was next, laying out his medical records with damning precision. 17 documented cases of malnutrition, 9 untreated injuries, 4 instances of what I can only describe as deliberate harm disguised as discipline. Mercer's voice shook with controlled anger. These are children, Your Honor, not livestock to be worked until they drop. The courtroom murmured. Wade's face had gone red, his composure cracking. Your Honor, his lawyer said, these allegations are baseless attacks on my client's character. Mr. Wade is a pillar of this community. He has contributed generously to the church, the school, the very infrastructure of Elkhorn. Money doesn't make a man good, Reverend Hartley said, rising from his seat. I've been complicit in this for too long. I took Mr. Wade's donations and looked the other way when I should have spoken out. But I'm speaking now. Those children deserve protection, not exploitation. The judge held up his hand for silence. I've heard testimony about Mr. Wade. Now I'd like to hear about Mr. McAllister. Sir, you're a stranger to this town. You have no property, no established income, no family connections. Why should I believe you can provide for 7 children? Jonas stood. This was the moment everything hinged on. He could feel the children's eyes on him, feel the weight of their hope and fear. Your Honor, everything you said is true. I have nothing. No ranch, no money, no impressive title. 3 weeks ago, I rode into Elkhorn planning to stay one night and move on. That's what I'd been doing for 5 years, ever since my wife and children died of diphtheria. The courtroom went quiet. Even Wade's lawyers stopped shuffling their papers. I ran from that grief, told myself that if I never stayed anywhere, never cared about anyone, I could outrun the pain. But you can't outrun grief. It follows you everywhere. Jonas paused, steadying himself. I found these children huddled against a church wall, freezing, starving, waiting for someone to care whether they lived or died. And I stopped. For the first time in 5 years, I stopped running. That's a touching story, Wade's lawyer interrupted. But sentiment doesn't feed children. No, it doesn't. But community does. Jonas gestured to the people behind him. Every person in this room who came to support these children, they're part of the answer. Doctor. Mercer has provided medical care without asking for payment. Mrs. Stone has offered to teach them. Henderson has given blankets and shelter. Mrs. Hendricks has brought food. Reverend Hartley has remembered what his faith is supposed to mean. A collection of well-wishers is not a guardian. No, but I am. Jonas turned back to the judge. I'm not perfect, Your Honor. I don't have all the answers. But I love these children. I will work every day of my life to provide for them, and I will never, never treat them as anything less than the precious souls they are. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Strong words, Mr. McAllister. But I need to hear from the children themselves. Young man, he addressed Eli, please approach. Eli stood. His face was pale, but his shoulders were square, his chin lifted. He walked to the front of the courtroom and faced the judge. Tell me, son, what do you want? I want my family to stay together. I want us to be safe. I want someone who looks at us and sees children, not problems to be solved or workers to be used. Eli's voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on. For 2 years, I've been trying to keep my brothers and sisters alive. I've begged for food. I've stolen when begging didn't work. I've slept in collapsed buildings and doorways and anywhere that offered a little shelter from the cold. I've done things I'm ashamed of because I had no other choice. The courtroom was utterly silent. Mr. Wade says he wants to help us, but we've seen how he helps. We've talked to the children who work on his ranch. They're scared all the time. They don't laugh. They don't play. They just work and hurt and wait for it to be over. Eli's eyes found Wade, and something fierce burned in them. We'd rather freeze on the streets than live like that. And Mr. McAllister? Eli turned to look at Jonas. Something passed between them, a connection forged in blizzards and midnight conversations and promises kept. Mr. McAllister came into our lives 3 days ago. In that time, he's done more for us than anyone has in 2 years. He fed us when we were hungry. He found us shelter when we were freezing. He went out into a blizzard to bring me back when I ran away. Eli's voice broke. He held me while I cried. He told me I didn't have to be strong alone anymore. He said we were family. Family, the judge repeated. That's a significant word. It's the only word that matters, Eli straightened. I don't care if he doesn't have money or a ranch or a fancy house. He has us, and we have him. That's enough. That's more than enough. Grace was called next. She spoke quietly but clearly about the responsibility she'd carried, about watching her siblings struggle, about the hope Jonas had brought into their lives. For the first time since our mother left, I feel like someone sees us, really sees us. Not as burdens or charity cases, but as people worth caring about. Grace wiped her eyes.
That's all we've ever wanted, to be seen.
Toby came forward, clutching his drawing, the one with the house and the 8 figures. I drew this, he said, holding it up for the judge to see. It's our family, the one I hope we can have, with a real house and a real father, and nobody being scared anymore. His dreamy eyes focused with unusual intensity. Mr. Jonas made me believe it could be real, that happy endings aren't just in stories. The twins spoke together, finishing each other's sentences the way they always did. He stayed with Ben when he was sick, sat up all night making sure he could breathe. Didn't ask for anything in return, just wanted him to get better. That's what fathers do, they said in unison. Real fathers. Even Hannah was called forward. She stood before the judge, clutching Margaret, her rag doll, and spoke with the simple conviction of childhood. Mr. Tallman is nice. He gives us food and tells us we're safe. He doesn't yell or hit or make us scared. Margaret says he's the best grown-up we've ever met, and Margaret is very smart. A ripple of soft laughter went through the courtroom. Even Judge Morrison smiled. And what does Margaret think should happen? Margaret thinks we should stay with Mr. Tallman forever and ever. And I think so too. Ruth was the last to be called. She approached the front of the room slowly, her red hair bright against her pale face. Everyone held their breath, knowing her history, knowing she hadn't spoken in over a year. Miss McCarthy, the judge said gently, I understand you've had a difficult time. You don't have to speak if you're not able. Ruth stood very still. Her eyes moved across the courtroom, landing on her siblings, on Jonas, on the crowd of people who had gathered to support them. She took a breath, and then she spoke. My parents died in a fire. Her voice was rusty from disuse, barely above a whisper, but in the silent courtroom, it carried. I watched them. I couldn't save them. After that, I stopped talking. There was nothing left to say. Jonas felt tears prick his eyes. Beside him, Grace was crying silently. But then he came. Ruth's eyes found Jonas. He didn't try to make me talk. He just stayed. He let me be quiet. He gave me jobs to do, things that made me feel useful. He saw me, even when I was invisible.
And now? The judge asked.
Now I have something to say. Ruth's voice grew stronger. I want to stay with him. I want to stay with my family. I want to stop being afraid. She paused, and when she spoke again, her words were clear and certain. He saved us. Please don't take us away from him. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. This girl, who hadn't spoken in 14 months, had just delivered the most powerful testimony of the day. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. Thank you, Miss McCarthy. You may return to your seat. Wade's lawyer made one last attempt. Your Honor, emotional appeals aside, the facts remain. Mr. McAllister is a vagrant with no stable income and no— Enough! The judge's voice cut through the argument. I've heard enough. He looked out over the courtroom, his eyes moving from Wade to Jonas to the children to the crowd of townspeople who had come to support them. In my years on the bench, I've seen many custody disputes. Most of them come down to money, property, social standing. The assumption is that whoever has the most resources will make the best guardian. He paused. That assumption is often wrong. Wade sat forward, his face tight with anger. Cornelius Wade, you are a wealthy man. You have a large ranch, a successful business standing in this community. On paper, you would seem the obvious choice for guardian. The judge's voice hardened. But I've also heard testimony about how you treat the children already in your care. Testimony from a doctor, from former workers, from people who have no reason to lie. And I've heard from the children themselves, who would rather face the streets than live under your roof. Your Honor, I'm not finished. Judge Morrison turned to Jonas. Mr. McAllister, you have nothing. No property, no wealth, no family name. By conventional standards, you are the least qualified person to raise 7 children. Jonas's heart sank. But you have something Mr. Wade lacks. You have the love and trust of the children in question. You have a community willing to support you. And you have something I've seen too rarely in these proceedings: genuine selflessness. You didn't seek out these children for profit or status. You stopped because they needed help. That matters. The judge straightened his papers. It is the decision of this court that guardianship of Elijah, Grace, Tobias, Ruth, Samuel, Benjamin, and Hannah be awarded to Jonas McAllister. The petition filed by Cornelius Wade is hereby denied. The courtroom erupted. Jonas felt the children crash into him, 7 small bodies wrapping around him, laughing and crying at the same time. Grace was sobbing. Eli was shaking. Hannah was shouting something about Margaret being right all along. The twins were jumping up and down. Toby was clutching his drawing like it was magic. And Ruth was smiling. A real smile that transformed her face. Furthermore, the judge continued, raising his voice over the celebration, I am directing the territorial authorities to conduct a full investigation into conditions at the Wade Ranch. Any children currently residing there will be examined by Dr. Mercer and removed if evidence of abuse is found. Wade's face had gone white. He stood abruptly, knocking over his chair, and stormed out of the courtroom. His lawyers gathered their papers and hurried after him. Mr. McAllister, Judge Morrison addressed Jonas directly, raising 7 children alone will not be easy. I trust you understand the responsibility you've taken on. I do, Your Honor. Good. Then make sure you're worthy of the trust these children have placed in you. Don't let them down. I won't. I swear it. The judge nodded, gathered his things, and departed. The courtroom slowly emptied, people streaming past Jonas and the children, offering congratulations and words of support. Henderson clapped Jonas on the shoulder. Mercer shook his hand. Abigail was crying and laughing at the same time. Mrs. Hendricks approached with her husband. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for not doing more sooner, for being afraid. You're here now. That's what matters." Reverend Hartley was last. "I spoke to the congregation this morning, before the hearing, told them about everything. My cowardice, my complicity, the way we've all failed these children. Some of them want to help, really help, with food, with clothes, with repairs to the mill." He paused. "If you'll accept it." "I'll accept anything that helps keep these children safe." "Then you'll have it. You have my word." They left the courthouse together, Jonas and his family, stepping out into the cold Wyoming sunlight. The crowd followed, spreading out around them, a community that had finally found its conscience. Eli walked beside Jonas, matching his stride. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it. All of us." "I still can't believe it. I kept waiting for something to go wrong, for the judge to rule against us, for Wade to win like he always wins." "Not this time." "No." Eli's voice was wondering. "Not this time." They walked back toward the mill, but Abigail caught up with them before they got far. "Jonas, wait. There's something you should know." She was slightly out of breath. "The mill. You know Wade owned it, but what you don't know is that he bought it specifically to use against you. Now that the hearing is over, now that he's lost, he'll try to take it back, evict us." "Maybe, or maybe not." Abigail smiled. "I did some research last night. The original deed to that property has a clause. If the mill is used for community benefit, as a school, a church, a gathering place, it can't be sold to private interests without a town vote. And I've already spoken to the mayor. We're proposing that the mill be converted into an official community center. A place for the children to live, yes, but also a schoolroom, a meeting hall, whatever the town needs. If the vote passes, Wade can't touch it." Jonas stared at her. "You did all that in one night?" "I told you. Some of us have been waiting for a reason to fight back. You gave us that reason." The vote passed 3 days later. The mill became the Elkhorn Community Center, with Jonas as its official caretaker and the 7 children as its first permanent residents. Volunteers came every day to help with repairs, fixing the roof, sealing the walls, building proper beds for the children. By spring, the old flour mill had been transformed into something that actually looked like a home. Eli started working with Henderson at the livery, learning the trade, earning money he was proud of. Grace took over managing the household, creating systems and schedules that kept everything running smoothly. Toby enrolled in school and discovered a talent for mathematics that surprised everyone except himself. The twins thrived. Ben's cough finally cleared, their mischief returning in full force. Hannah taught Margaret to read, which consisted of her reading aloud while the rag doll listened. Ruth spoke more every day. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to ask for things she needed. Enough to say goodnight. Enough to tell Jonas she loved him, which she did one evening in May, quietly and without fanfare, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Because it was. Cornelius Wade left Elkhorn that summer. The investigation into his ranch had uncovered enough evidence to destroy his reputation, and faced with possible criminal charges, he sold everything and moved back east. The children who had been working for him were placed with families, real families, who had been too afraid to come forward before. Jonas received a letter from the territorial courthouse in July. Official adoption papers requiring his signature. He signed them at the kitchen table in the mill, surrounded by 7 children who bore his name now, who were his in every way that mattered. "Does this mean it's really real?" Hannah asked, watching him write. "It's really real." "Forever and ever?" "Forever and ever." She threw her arms around him, and then they all did. And Jonas sat there in the middle of his family, feeling something he'd thought he'd never feel again. Complete. 1 year later, on a warm September evening, they gathered on the porch of the mill to watch the sunset. All 8 of them, because that's what they were now, a family of 8. "Tell us about them," Hannah said, the way she always did when the light got soft and the world felt peaceful. "Tell us about Daniel and Sarah and baby Matthew." Jonas smiled. The pain was still there, would always be there, but it had transformed into something different, something he could hold without it cutting him. "Daniel was 8 when he died. He had brown hair like yours, Eli, and he wanted to be a blacksmith. He loved watching the sparks fly from the forge." "Like me," Toby said. "I love sparks." "Like you." Sarah was 5, and she was wild. Couldn't keep her out of trees or mud puddles or trouble of any kind. "She sounds fun," Hannah said. She was. And Matthew was just a baby. He had the sweetest laugh. He'd laugh at anything, faces, sounds, just the pure joy of being alive. "Do you think they know about us?" Grace asked softly. "Do you think they're watching from heaven?" Jonas looked at his family, at Eli, no longer a boy carrying an impossible weight, but a young man with hope in his eyes. At Grace, still caring for everyone, but now allowing others to care for her too. At Toby, with his dreams, and Ruth with her hard-won words, and the twins with their unbreakable bond, and Hannah with her belief in magic. "I think they know," he said. "I think they helped me find you. I think they wanted me to stop running and start living again." "I'm glad they did," Hannah said. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere in town, a dog barked. A horse whinnied in Henderson's livery. Children laughed in the distance, playing some game before dinner called them home. "I love you," Eli said. It was the first time he'd said it out loud, without qualification or condition. "I love you too." "All of us?" "All of you. Every single one." Ruth leaned against Jonas's shoulder. The twins sprawled across the porch steps. Toby was already drifting into some story in his head. Grace sat with Hannah in her lap, both of them content. This was the life Jonas had stopped believing was possible. A home. A family. A reason to wake up every morning. He'd found it in the most unlikely place, with the most unlikely people, and he would spend every day of his remaining years being grateful for it. Hannah tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Tallman? Papa?" The word hit him like sunlight after years of darkness. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Margaret wants to know if this is the happy ending." Jonas looked at his family, at these 7 children who had transformed his grief into purpose and his loneliness into love. He thought about all they had overcome together, all they had built, all they would continue to build in the years to come. "You know what? I think Margaret's right." He pulled Hannah close, feeling the warmth of all of them pressed around him. "This is exactly the happy ending." "Good," Hannah said, satisfied. "That's what I told her." And it was. Not because everything was perfect, not because there wouldn't be hard days ahead, but because they had each other, because they had chosen to be family, because in the end, love really was enough. They sat together on that porch as the stars emerged one by one, 7 children and 1 man who had found each other in the wreckage of their separate griefs and built something beautiful from the pieces. A home, a family, a future. Everything they had ever wanted. Everything they finally had.